So carrying on from the last video, we are going to make a new folder. We'll just start from scratch again because we've got it in the DnaWeb template. Create a new folder, type in DnaWeb into the command line, and that'll spin up the DnaWeb engine. Make sure you're using the latest version, 105 at the minute, which you'll see when you start it up here. If not, then upgrade it. The new version will now open Visual Studio Code for you automatically in this folder. And then you can type, let's just start with the new template, fabric.modern1, which I'll update after this video. So this will likely pull in the results of this video when you come to watch the video. This starts up a website. It's opened up the browser in the background with where we got to in the last video. And it's also got the folder open for us in Visual Studio Code automatically now, so it's one less step to do. So that gets us to where we were in the last video, which is here. What we want to do now is have a slide-in mascot. So I've got my mascot here, and I want this to basically be part of a banner here, which I'm sure you've seen in the last video. I can pull it up in Photoshop if you give me a minute, and we want this to kind of slide in. So open recent. So you can see here we want the mascot to kind of be like a big banner, but what I want to have, instead of this just being here, I want this to kind of slide in from the left and do like a little shake, and then these particles I want to kind of make an actual particle effect that, you know, glitters up, if you will. So we're going to add all that. This part I want to typewriter in, which is going to be more complicated. So, well, it's about the same complication, but we'll split that up to a second video. So this is the, you know, the thing we're after is basically this guy sliding in. So let's start with, I've got the mascot here, the picture. I'm going to plonk him in the folder we've just made in assets and images. So you can use your own image or, you know, make use of this for now. Then we'll go to Visual Studio Code. One thing with us that I forgot to add, that I'll add to all the templates in the Fabric engine to the standard header, is we also want to lock the zoom for mobiles. Not necessarily lock it, they can still zoom in, but effectively fix the zooming action on mobiles. So to do that, we simply add another meta tag, and its name is viewport. And basically we set the value to, we want the width to be the device width, and I think it's that device width, and initial scale to be 1. And you don't really need to be too much bothered about what this is or what it does. You can Google what the viewport meta tag is, but basically it sets the expected browser's width here to the device's width and make sure it's always defaulted to a 1 scale, if you will. And that just kind of fixes common issues in mobile browsers in terms of how it then looks when you render it on a mobile. So I'm just chucking that in, and that will go into all the standard templates. And now I just want to improve this slightly as well, because we're going to have animations going in. So this just appears the menu. So I want to like kind of slide that menu down when it first loads. So to do that, we will we'll go to standard menu here, and we'll add a slide in down class, and then we'll go to the SAS in animations, and we'll add a slide in here. So we'll do a dot slide in down, and that'll just be animate, animation. Then we'll do what's called slide in down. We'll call the animation. We'll make it last for I don't want to say half a second probably, and that's all we need. Then we'll make the actual keyframes animation called slide in down, and then for that now we just have a 0%. So, you know, when it first starts, we'll have the transform to translate the Y. So we want it start completely out of the way, so 100% up, and we might as well make it invisible as well, so we'll have it kind of fading in at the same time. And then when we get to 100%, we'll simply set this to 0 and this to 1. so it slides in and down, if you will. So when we save that, I think that's all we need now to, there we go. So now you see this slides down. So if we slowed that down so you can see it, you can see that it basically slides in and fades in. The fade's very subtle. So you could have, if we were to do, let's do a 30% and it's still got opacity of 0. And we can kind of keep that transform. Oh yeah, get rid of the transform. Keep it invisible for longer. And then as it fades in near the end, we can even make that 50% maybe. And then we can speed it up. And I quite like that, I think. And then 0.5, so it's nice and fast. And that's just a really subtle kind of fade and appear. So there's just a simple animation to do that. The other thing I want to change is as soon as we scroll, this zooms up. So you're never really getting the feel that it's there for a while. So let's just jump into the JavaScript file, JavaScript.scroll down. And for now, let's just change this 60 to, say, 200. So at least you can scroll a bit more before it zooms out the way. And then what else do we want? Because we are going to have this guy slide in, when we scroll up, I don't want this, see the background color. So I know it's all the same at the minute. But if I were to do the background of this is red now. If we have a guy here, and then we scroll down, he's going to get chopped off by this navigation bar. So instead, I want this to kind of be transparent at the start, so he seems to slide through it. And then when this reduces in size, we'll bring the color back in. So to do that, it's quite easy. We'll just go to the top menu, standard, and then also do this main color here, which is the color gets added. We'll start off transparent. And then when we go to the reduced class, which is here, we'll bring the color back in. And let's just do it red for the moment, just so you can quickly see the color better. So that's now, as you can see, invisible there, and then the color comes in. But you can see it's also a harsh bringing of color. So let's just fade that in nicely. So go to the transition of the top menu standard, and do background color, and then the transition normal. And that should give us a nice fade in. There we go. So that'll give us like a transparent top menu that then fades over. So that when our header scrolls underneath, it will initially look like it's going straight through, and then this will fade over and cover it. But once it's far enough down that it kind of looks correct. So we'll just remove that red now, bring that color back to the color we want. And I think that's it for the top menu. So now it's time to bring this guy in. So let's make this big here. We'll bring the guy in inside the main here. So where are we? We'll have mascot banner, we'll call this, I guess. Then, because this is a header, I'm going to use the header semantic HTML from HTML5. So it's kind of descriptive for the search engines. Then we'll want a grid wrapper. So we can do, if you can't remember them, just go to DnaWeb and type live variables. And then you can see all the variables there. We want the fabric, we want a grid wrapper. So maybe it's fabric.grid. Ah, there we go, fabric.wrapper grid. So $fabric.wrapper grid, $, and save. Was that right? Fabric.wrapper grid. Where have I not found fabric.wrapper grid for profile? Okay, I've actually got a bug there in the code. Yeah, okay. So I'll have to fix that in the DNA code. So for now then, I'll fix that for version 1.0.6. So let's see what the actual... there we go. So for now, we'll just copy this out of here and paste it in, and I will fix that for the next video. Not sure. I'm sure that worked. Maybe I've very recently broken something in the code. Fabric.grid. Nope. So yeah, I've obviously got a little bug in the code. I'll fix that and push this live, very shortly after the video. So we have a grid wrapper, which keeps the content within this grid, width, as you can see here. Then the grid, then the column. So that's all your boilerplate stuff. So what we want is 2 columns. We want one on the left, one on the right, like this resize me thing here. So on the left and a right grid. So for that, in fact, we could probably, not that we need to, but we can probably chuck just demo col on the column to get it show as well. And then maybe you just got to put some content and see it. Fabric demo grid. Chuck that up there a minute. I'm just trying to get the outlines. Oh, it's on the content inside demo col. Nope, okay, let's just ignore trying to get the outlines for now. I could just add them directly to the style anyway, but we've got a column there and we want it 50%. So if we do that, it will be 1/2 as the class. And we want 2 of them. So we've got 2 1/2s there. We'll just put A and B in for now, just so you can see something. You can see there's 1/2 and 1/2. And if you reduce, you can see it stays 1/2 and 1/2. So we want the guy in this section, the text in this one. Because we want to be responsive, we will change the mobile one to 1 whole. So basically this class makes it so that when it's mobile size, the columns go to a full width. So you get down to mobile and you can see now they've gone full width, one on top of the other. And then that's 2, that's full width. So that's kind of where we want it. So when we're really small, we'll have the guy just the full width. Otherwise, it's split between 2. So we'll get rid of that B. So now in here, we want the actual mascot now. So we'll do a div, a class, and we'll call this mascot background. And now we just want to make a style. So we actually have a mascot background. Because this is a style specific to this exact website, I'll just chuck it in the style CSS for now, not directly into the template. And we will do mascot background. First thing we want to do is we'll bring in the background image. That's the URL, and it's /assets images at mascot.png. So we just save that and have a look. That didn't work. Mascot background. Oh, it's a background image. We need a size. So for height, we'll set it to say 600 pixels for now, which is a decent size. This is now full, so you need to wrap him inside the size of the container. So to do that, we'll do background size. Not background size, rather. Oh yeah, it is background size. And then contain, which basically means keep the guy within the width or the height. So now he's collapsed to width, but now he's repeating over and over. So we want to remove that repeat. So background repeat to no repeat. And now it's gone. We'll start adding some comments. Don't repeat image. Shrink to fit. mascot background image decent size. So that gets us to there. The other thing we want is, as you'll notice, if this gets bigger, you can't tell much here because of the size, but if we inspect, you can see there the grid. When we look over the column, you can see that the guy is basically centered, not pushed to the right. So because of this aura at the bottom, this glow, you can see there he's just not quite over. So we'd also want to we'll float him. No, we don't need float him. Is the background image, don't we? Background position to the right, and that hasn't changed much actually. But in fact, has it changed at all? I'm just thinking if this picture changes at all, we want to keep him to the right hand side. So if this was, I don't know, 400, there you go. So if we made him smaller, now he's shifted so he stays on the center line, which is what we want. And then we grow him to whatever size we desire. So if we don't position him to the right and we add it 400, then he's going to be over that side. So we want to kind of shift him to the right so he's always in the center. And then I still like about 600 as a size. That seems a good size. And then the only thing there is when we go to mobile, we don't want to, don't want him to the right. We want him centered because now he's slightly off. So to do that, we do the @include media breakpoint mobile. So then anything in here only runs on mobile. On mobile, center image. So then the background position will be center. And again, you can't see much difference, but it's all based on the size of your picture. So if the picture is smaller, you want to make sure it does definitely stay centered. So it's just being sure that he does. So I think that's the guy in fact, we also want to keep him to the top, the Y position to the top. I'm going to add a slide in animation, which I think in the animation I'll probably just chuck the X to the, is it the X or the Y? No, we want to keep the Y to the top, don't we? Let's put in I'm just trying to think. We basically want to chuck this image up, but I want to animate him in first. So the animation, I think, will override the translate position anyway. So let's just add the animation and then see, because we want this guy to shift up, but I want him to slide in first. So let's go to the animations. Let's make another animation. We'll call this one slide in right shake, because I want it to slide in from the right, and I also want it to do kind of a little shake, so he'll come in and then just do a little do back and forward like this has got. So I want him to slide in and then do that. So that should be quite easy. The animation itself we will call slide in right shake. So we've got a class called it and an animation called it, which is fine. And we'll do the standard transition time. And then we will also then here make sure the transform translate X position by default is 0. And now we make the actual keyframe animation. And this is the slide in right shake. And we'll just copy and paste one of these for a minute. So the transform this time, we will want to translate the X this time, not the Y. We want to start off the screen again, which is fine. And we'll also start invisible, so it's all the same. Then we want to slide in pretty much all the way. Just let's say about 70%, where we want this to be slid all the way, which would be 0. But what we want to do is add that shake. Let's just get rid of this opacity now till the end. So once it's slid all the way in, I think if we save that, well, might as well, it's easy enough. So 70% it'll slide in. If 0, it'll come all the way back to where it started. We want to overshoot by, say, 2%. So it goes past the point of where it should start. Then we'll go to, say, 75%. And we'll go backwards 2. So -2. And then we'll go to 80%. And just go back to 2 again. And we'll have 85%. So this is where we're just adding the shake, right near the end of the animation. So this time we'll just go back -1. And then at 95%, say, we'll forward 1. And then finally at 100%, we'll simply be where we started, and opacity is 1. So that's as easy as it is to make animations. It's nice and easy, quick and simple. So if we save that, we haven't applied the animation yet, so now we need to apply the shake in right, slide in right shake class. So to do that in our style, we just override it, or rather extend it as it's called. So extend slide in shake. And then if we save that, we can see slides in. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to do with this. Let's just chuck this translate in. Transform translate y to 0. And that should shift. Was it the background position? Background. Bear with me, I'm just trying to think it through in my head. Background position Y, that's it. So that should have also worked. Background position Y has been overridden by. What's it being overridden by? Background position right coming after it. So we would have to plonk it there for order of importance. And there we go, it's shifted to the top. And then mobile I'd need it as well because of the override of position. So you're doing center there. I mean, maybe there's a position that's got center top, I don't know. Maybe it's center top, like that. And then we don't need this, which it probably is. So right top, maybe that does the same thing. There we go. So it's center but top. So center on the x-axis, top on the y. So that's got him into position where we want. He animates in, that animates in. Right, so next thing. We want now, when you scroll, you see some sites. So see now he goes over, as I'm saying, that's what we wanted. His head kind of goes over, then it fades out. But initially, it looks like he's scrolling up instead of getting instantly chopped off. So some sites you'll see that you get like a parallax effect. So when you're scrolling, this banner, if you will, here kind of seems to start sticking and coming down and acting like it's on a different plane. It's traveling at a different speed than your scroll. So we're going to add that to this guy. And again, there's no need for complicated libraries. And first thing most people will do, again, as I always say, is they'll go and download a JavaScript library. And it'll be, a kilobyte long, or it's got loads of crap in. And it's literally about, I don't know, probably make this in less than 50 lines of code. So we'll just go ahead and make this guy parallax when we scroll down. So let's make a new JavaScript file for now. And again, we will move to TypeScript shortly. Call this dna.scroll.parallax.js. Include that in the HTML. Then go to the new class. Do the usual onload, which it likes to keep renaming my function every time I type. So wait for the page to load, like we do with everything. And then we'll now have selected items, very similar to everything else we've done. Document.query selector all. So basically find all the elements with a data attribute and we'll call it parallax scroll background. And then in order to find that element, we will add that to our HTML. So our mascot background here, let's just add the parallax to. We're going to give it a value as well, so we can change it. So we want it to scroll at half the speed it should, so between 0 and 1. So this now will find all elements. Find all elements with data attribute. Then for each of those, because what we're going to do is change the background position Y and bump it down. So if we were to scroll down here and this guy wanted to scroll at half the speed, what you can do is basically get the background position Y, and you can set it to say 100 pixels. And you can see he jumps down, or 20 or 30 or 50. So all we're going to be doing is when we're scrolling, we will start shoving this guy further and further down the screen using the background position Y. So we'll use the for each helper, selected items, and the item here. Because we're going to animate the background, we want to make sure by default they all have it. So we'll do item, which is the element. That we'll call it element. So element.style, which is the CSS style. Background position Y equals 0 pixels. So we need to do that because we need to make sure if we're going to mess with the position, it starts off before any animation with it set to 0. Again, in case our CSS style changes it. Fix all backgrounds to start at Y0. Then what we want to do now is on scroll, we'll have a function. And again, for each, every time we scroll, we'll go through the items again. We'll kind of copy and paste that a little bit quicker. So when we scroll, for each element, and then we want to get the element size, and we'll do that with element dot get. I think it's bounding. No, what is it? Bounding client rect or something like that. I think that's it. We then want to let's just console.debug that out. Make sure I've got that first. And save. Go to the console and scroll. There we go. So you can see as I'm scrolling the guy, we've got his X, which never changes, his Y, which you can see is changing. So if we go to the top, his Y is 144 pixels down. As we scroll, he gets brought up. As he gets chopped off, the Y goes to a minus because it's based on the position of the view. So Y0 is up here, and then the further down's, a higher number. And anything above, out of view is a minus. So we can detect when this guy's out of view when the bottom here is a minus figure. So as we scroll and he's nearly gone, you can see bottom's 200, scroll, and then effectively there now minus. So basically when the client bounds bottom is less than 1, this element's out of view, and we don't want to keep processing it. We don't want to keep pushing the this guy down and down and down all the time when he's not even in view. Otherwise, again, it boils down to that, the issue with, yeah, it'll work, but are you aware of how much work you're putting on the browser? So you've got to keep it light. So only nudge down background when it is in view. So then we'll do if client bounds dot bottom is less than 0, just return, basically, don't do anything. And now if we did the console.debug again, you could see that happening. client bounds. Well, now we only get the output while he's on screen. And then once he's gone, you see now we no longer get an update. And as we scroll back up, it starts updating again. So now we know we're only running this code when we need to. The next task is we want to get that value we put on the item here. So we can actually get that value and move it by the right amount. So get parallax ratio. Ratio equals element.get attribute, and it's data parallax scroll background, we called it. And then from that, we want to calculate a bump y, I guess we'll call it. And we want to basically get the, as we saw here, as you're scrolling down, really the thing you're interested in is you want to start bumping this guy once the top of him, so here the top gets in a minus figure basically. So the further out of view he gets, you want to start pushing him down to make him look like he's staying where he is. So that will be the minus client bounds.top times parallax ratio. And then the one thing you've got to be aware of here is we don't want to bump him when the top is, below the top of the document. So like right now here, that would be 144 times 0.5, it'd be 70, so it'd actually be pulling him up. So we just want to make sure we only want this guy to shove down when top is above 0. So to do that, you can simply do a math.max, so we get no minus figures, and it's 0 or the result we've got. So that'll keep the results clipped. So if we then do console.debug bump y, you can see basically the value we'll be looking at. So there's nothing there while we're, he's above there. And as soon as we start going below, we're basically getting, all that is there is the amount of y value that is off the screen, but times by the, that's in the wrong position. Well, actually I can stay in that position, that's fine. It's basically the amount we want to bump him down. So we scroll to the bottom and he's like 288 there. If we were to change the parallax value then to like 1, so it should bump down the full amount, that number should be larger now. And there you go, 490. So we know we've got a value that's basically increasing the further out the way of the screen he is. And now all we need to do is just simply apply that to that background position. So apply it to the background position. So that will be element.style.background position y equals bump y, and turn it to a pixel value. And now when we scroll, you can see he gets kept further down. You'll also see that this is really jaggedy, so we'll fix that in a minute. There's a few issues here, but you can see the general thing. You scroll and you can see he's being pushed down quite clearly because now his feet are getting chopped off further and further. So that's giving you a parallaxy style. But let's first fix a few issues. So number one is you see this message we're now getting. We're getting a warning. The site appears to use scroll linked positioning effects because this is such a common thing that people do. And it's warning that it's not a good idea. Basically, it's a poor implementation. So the only reason this is a poor implementation is because when we're running this function on scroll, if we went to our scroll core here on scroll, we basically get the scroll, we wait for a certain amount of time, then we simply tell it to process the scroll. But the main JavaScript, this scroll, without going too much into depth, there's multiple threads on the whole rendering and the way that the web works. So your JavaScript is run on one thread, your updating of the UI is run on another thread. So by running this JavaScript on scroll, it's not on the UI thread, and then invoking a CSS based on that value, and updating the UI, you're basically out of sync, which is why you're getting this jaggedy effect. So as you scroll, you update the position, but you're updating the position before the UI has updated itself. So this guy gets shunted down, then the view gets scrolled up, and that's this jaggedy effect. So the fix for that's pretty simple. So the one thing we need to do, well, it's the only thing we need to do, is we need to call what's called request animation frame. And instead of calling this directly, we want to call, is it just request animation frame? I'm pretty sure it is. Request animation frame. So to do that, but I think this is only supported on certain versions. We can do a can I use on that and see, but I'm pretty sure we could get it, for older ones. But honestly, it's kind of a derivative effect. If the browser doesn't support this request animation frame, we can make a fallback. But again, I don't know. Let's make a fallback just for the sake of it. So we'll add it to core, I guess. Universal request animation. So if we do that, we'll just set it on the window, which is the default of where we get when we say request animation. So that's the one we just called. But what we'll do is set it to either itself if it already exists. So we don't override it if it's already there. If it doesn't exist, which is what you'll get with this or, then we can then drop back to the browser-specific versions, which is the prefixes like mos and then request animation frame. And you just put capital R. And then if that doesn't exist, you do window.webkit. And then capital R. If that doesn't exist, you fall back to the Windows one. So these are all just vendor prefixes. And finally, if that doesn't exist, you're kind of screwed. You're just going to have to make up a function yourself. So we'll then just make a function up, which does a set timeout. And it will call it every 60 seconds, say. Or 60 times a second, rather. So 60 frames per second. I don't need that there. I think that's it. Yeah, so that should be a universal request framed animation frame now. So this should work in every single browser, even the old ones. And all we need to do now is change where we call the process on scroll to now call request animation frame. And what this does is it now puts this on the UI thread and runs when the next rendering of the UI happens. So if we save that, presuming I haven't screwed anything up, which I must have because we've still got window.request animation frame is not an object in scroll core. And why is it not an object? Window.request. Okay, let's remove this a minute. Window.request animation frame. I'm sure that's what it is. Request animation frame. That is oh, hang on, I've left the function because we're calling a we're passing in the function to be called, so you have to remove the parentheses. That's what it is. I'm hoping. There we go. Now we've screwed up somewhere else. Doing well here. That didn't help. Line 64 maybe. Oh, no. I messed that up. Right, finally, there we go. So now we're scrolling. You see it's still jaggedy, but we've not got the warning anymore because we're correctly running on the UI thread. So the reason this will be jaggedy is because if you remember, our on scroll callback only happens when, it limits it by almost 100. It just really cuts down. So we need to add, and this is in a rare occasion you should do it, is to update the scroll to call, to be called every single pixel because we want this to be smooth. So we'll just copy and paste the scroll callback and call it scroll instant callback. We'll get the on scroll function, copy and paste that, and we'll call this on scroll instant. And we'll call the scroll instant callbacks. And process on scroll, we'll copy and paste that. And on process on scroll instant for each scroll instant callback. So all we're doing is copying and pasting and renaming. So now we've got a bunch of functions that you can call on scroll instant and process on scroll instant. And then we'll copy this process. And basically now every window event at the very top, so every single scroll that gets hit, we will process the instant scrolls. So if somebody now hooks into process on scroll instant, it will be called all the time. So if we then change this parallax on scroll to on scroll instant, we'll now hit a lot more. And you can see we get smoother action now. So that's the parallax effect. And you can see it's a lot smoother when we don't have the debugging window open as well. So now there's our kind of parallax effect where the guy stays, gives a kind of motion effect. And that's now all controllable by this number. So you could change this to like say 0.9 and get almost a complete, he doesn't want to move type of thing. And if you did 1, technically, you'd get a static image. It'll be slightly off static due to the JavaScript, but he practically stays where he is, as you can see. So it all depends on how much effect you want. For my effect, I think that original 0.5 seemed to be enough. It's just a subtle effect that you kind of notice he's not quite moving off, but it's very subtle. It's not overkill. And then this guy animates in. So I think the last thing we want to do now is see these little particles here. And they're cool on the image and they look really good, but they are just static. So I want to bring some kind of actual animation in here where there's kind of a particle engine going on, particle effects coming off his hands. So we'll make that next. So the way I'll do this is if we go back to here, I'll basically chuck in, well, in general, let's make a particle effect that simply works on like a div or anything really. So we'll do a div here. We'll do class equals particles, I guess. And then put a span inside class equals a bubble. And from that, we kind of can then have, let's just make this some size so we can see. So if we just chuck a block in here, you can see where this block is now. In fact, let's just do border. So you can see where that is now. That's the block where we want these particles to appear in, say. And then what we do is we put a bunch of bubbles in that we'll inject with JavaScript to make them random. But let's put one bubble in for now. So let's make a new folder in fabric called particles. And in here, we'll have a new file called dna.fabric.particles. Let's just make the style. So we just call it particles, which is the top level one. And we had a bubble. So the top level style. And then also let's include, let's go back and save that. Let's include it in the DNA fabric thing here. Particles, DNA fabric particles. Don't know why I just noticed that. I don't know why the font's got a underscore and an extension. There we go. So we've added it to the styles. We've made one here. So now if we just make sure this works. So background red and save. There we go. So we're styling that. So what we'll do with these bubbles is make them position absolute in here. So we can simply set the width and the height to like or the top and the left, whichever, to a set value of a percentage and randomly place these bubbles all in this container. So to do that, the parent needs to be positioned relative. Otherwise, the absolute position bubble will be absolute to the, the top level document, not the container. Make inner elements absolute position based on our position, not the parent. So that's basically what that's doing. Then the bubble. So let's make a bubble. We'll do just do a width 8 pixels, height 8 pixels, background RGBA, and then I'll just make them this kind of blue color for the minute, just so they sort of match. So that'll be about 50,232,255. Whenever did it solid, then we don't see anything right now. Why is that? Particles, width, height, solid red, bubbles. Yeah, that should be there. Why is that not there? Position absolute. Okay, so they just need position absolute, what we're doing anyway. So position each bubble absolute. And then we also want to round that clearly. So border radius should make it 100% so it'll fully round. And there's kind of a bubble. We'll just do, say now the top is 50% down. Randomly there, left is 20%. And again, this will change with JavaScript. So there's a little particle, it kind of looks like that. And now we want to just animate it in a repeating pattern. Let's animate it up like it's glowing and disappearing. So we'll go to the animations. Let's add another one. We'll call this bubble up. And this will have an animation of bubble up. Make it last, say, 3 seconds and ease in. So it kind of slowly bubbles up like a bubble would. And let's just make it repeat infinitely. Bubble up animation. I'll comment more of these after before I commit. And then again, the keyframes for bubble up. Copy and paste this. Just saves a tiny bit of time. So we'll start the bubble off invisible, which is fine. Then we will kind of have a delayed start, if you will, where it fades in. So first it appears, fades in. Then transform, we'll do translate. Translate the Y, is it? Yep. And that'll be, we'll go up by 20%. So we'll start gradually going up. And then at 100%, and bear in mind this is based on the width of the particle itself. So it's based on this. So it's 20% of this is barely going to move. It's going to move 20% of 8 pixels. So it's going to move like 2 pixels in the first fade in. So practically nothing. So 100% is only going to move this bubble from here to here. It's barely going to move anywhere. So we'll do like 1,000, and that'll make it move 10 times its own width, so about up to there. And that means also then the bigger the bubble, the further it moves. So that'll actually cause tiny bubbles to move less and big bubbles to move further, which will add to the kind of random effect, if you will. And then also you want it to fade, the bubble to fade in fully, then move up, and as it's moving up to fade back out. So you want to change the opacity back to 0. And that bubble up now, we actually need to then apply that style. So now we just want to animate. So that we will do at extend bubble up, I think. And there we go. And there's like a little random bubble just appearing and fading. So all we need to do with that now to make it look correct is some JavaScript that randomizes this, dumps a load of bubbles in, and you'll see them when they're all over the place in all in positions. It'll look quite cool. So to start with, make it invisible to start before the JavaScript gets a chance to kick in. The position's already absolute. We've extended the animation. We'll remove all this because we'll set all that by a JavaScript. Make background a nice blue. This should really now be in fact, let's just chuck that back in a minute. This should really follow your theme. So let's say if this was color 1 and we saved, we get no color. Oh, that's because that's the background color. So that would probably be the color of bubbles you'd expect. But I think we do have this color in our theme anyway. There we go. So this is now following our theme, and because I've designed this site nicely, my color matches, you know, that. So we'll set that to color 3, remove them, set default, and you can always override that, obviously. Bubble color, make them round. So there's our style. That's all done and dusted, out the way. Now it's time for a bit of JavaScript again. So we'll go down to the JavaScript. We will need another file. Save this in the JavaScript folder called DNA.particles, I guess, a little mini particle engine. And it's there, yep, let's add it to the index. DNA.particles. This now we can remove, well, let's leave that in actually. Just get rid of the border, we kind of know where it is. The bubble we won't need because we'll inject that with JavaScript, so let's just remove the bubble. So that's ready for the JavaScript now. So in the particles, let's get this started again. So we have, let's make a function actually to call it. We'll call this, because we might want to make other different particle effects. So I'll say particle bubbles as the effect that we're doing here. So as usual, get all elements that want bubbles. If I could type. So bubble elements equals document.query all selector. And then here we'll have data particle bubbles. And then we will go ahead and add that to our thing here, where we want the bubbles injecting. And again, we'll pass in a value, we might as well. And this will be a value of, I guess, the percentage of how many bubbles we want in the whole thing. So it's going to be based on, I'll say 0 to 1 again, so we'll do 20%, say. So 20% of the width is how many bubbles, kind of density, if you will. We'll make it kind of a density factor. And then for each of them, so for each bubble element, function element. And then what now? We want to add bubbles, add number of bubbles based on a percentage of the width. So that will be bubble count, and we do element dot offset width. We'll get basically the width of the the element that we're applying it to, which is that 200 pixels in our case. And we want to times that by the element's data attribute, which is this. So that'll be 0.2 in our case. And then we'll just do a example data particle bubbles equals 0.2. We'll add 20 bubbles to an element 100 pixels wide, because that's 20%. So that's kind of an example of how to use it. Then we could do could debug that out first, make sure we've got what we expect. So we've got a 200 pixel, have we? We've got 200 pixel wide, so we should expect 40 from that bubble count thing. Oh, hang on, we've got to call that function as well. So on load function, just call the particle bubbles. Right, so there you go, 40. So it knows we're expecting 40 bubbles, which is good. So now we know we just want to inject 40 spans into that element, which is easy enough to do. So before, well, we could then just do for I equals 0, I is less than or equal to bubble count, no, less than bubble count, because it's a 0 index, I plus plus, loop each bubble. And then here you would then just do element.inner HTML, and then add to the bottom of it a span with a class. In fact, let's wrap that in single quotes this time so we can do double quotes in here. Class equals bubble, and that will inject. Then if we look, presumably, particles here, we should have 40 spans in. So now we've already injected all the bubbles. We just want to position them randomly. So to get a random number, let's go to DNA core and let's just add a core function. And we'll call this random number. And then we will accept a to and a from, or a from and a to rather. Generate a random number between the two values. And this is easy enough, you just return. And what we want to do here is basically you've got math.random. So you can just do math.random, but math.random will just generate a number between 0 and 1. So to get a number from 0 to 1, you'd have to do times the 2 and group that and add the from. So by default, you're always starting at from, and then you're going from a 0 to 1 number there times where you want to go to. So if you wanted to go to 10, say from 1 to 10, this would be 1 all the time, and then 10 times a number between 0 and 1. So if it was 1, it'd be 10 times 10. In fact, that'd actually be slightly over then. So what you'd want to do is, in fact, I don't think this can ever generate a 1, can it? Oh yeah, it can. So you could be 1 over here. We're not bothered about that for now. But what we will do is floor the result so that we keep it. Where are we? We keep it rounded to a specific number. So exactly between those two. We have math.floor random. Oh, one more bracket there. There we go. So that should generate a number between the from and to. So let's just check that a few times. So console.debug random number between, say, 5 and 15. I should dump that in loads, refresh. And that clearly didn't work. That is a number way above what we specified. So we have the 2. Oh, the 2 is technically 2 minus from, isn't it? There we go. Right, so there's the number now that we expect. So that will be between, so that'll be the difference now. So if you wanted to go from 5 to 15, this would be 10. So then you'd do a number between 1 and 10 plus the 5, that's it. So now you'll get a random number between the two. What I have noticed will help is, you can see this doesn't seem to be that random. Can be at times. But what I've found with the random function is if you basically times it by 10 and divide by 10, it sometimes adds a bit more randomness. But for now, that'll do. So we've now got a random number that we can make use of like that. So let's put that into practice with randomizing these bubbles. So we want to first get the size, I guess. So let's make the random size. So bubble, I should call it size. Random number between 1 and 8 pixels, say. Then we'll get, we want it to start up and down random and left and right random. So start, say, between, well, you can be between anywhere. Or, mind you, we don't want to go to the top part, between bottom 80%, say. So we'll have that as the top is random number between 0 and 80%. And then anywhere along the width is fine with me. So left will equal random number, and again it'll be a percentage, so between 0 and 100. And then if we do in here now, span bubble, style equals, and we'll have top equals, no, it's not top equals, it's top colon, and then the value, and then percentage it'll be, and semicolon. So we just haven't put the value in yet. We can put it in so it looks easier. Left to be 0%. Width would be pixels, wouldn't it? So 0 pixels, height 0 pixels. So that is all the values. And then basically where you got this 0 now, you want to put single quotes. Oh, bloody stupid IntelliSense thing. There, single quote, plus, plus. So inject in here the top. And I can just copy that kind of injection. In the left, we then do the left. The width is the size. And the height is the size. And then one other thing we can do is randomly start animation at delayed time. So delay is a random number between, say, 0 and 4 seconds. And as well as these styles, we can add another one, which is called animation delay. So that'll be animation, I think it's just animation dash delay. And it's like that, 0 seconds. So again, then we'll take this bit here, replace the 0, and that can be the delay. There we go. And let's jump that down to new line so it's easier to read. Left plus, yeah, we kind of don't care that the percentages there, just easier to visually see this way. So there we go, that helps a little bit with visualizing. So now, insert bubble. If all's gone well, this should now generate kind of a bubble effect. And you can see they're all going in batches though. They're all quite defined and something's not quite worked there because that isn't random. That's very much, you know, like a bunch of all one and a bunch of all another. So what have we done here? Did we not want to floor the whole value maybe? Because something is not, it's not quite random there, I don't feel. So, oh, I know what we did. When we did the random number, that's exactly what we did. We floored the entire result, not just the result of the from to. So we actually wanted to do that. Because random is a floating number, then times by the difference, we floor it to simply remove all the decimal points from there. What we ended up doing was flooring the entire result. But that's still doing it. Let's just not floor it anyway. Let's just go. There we go. So we don't have a floored result. And that kind of creates like a bubbly effect that we can play with, a little particle effect. and it's all random every time. So I'd say we don't always want to start it with at the very start. So let's always delay a second so this guy can come in. Then it'd start bubbling. So that's all right. You can just play with these values and mess with whatever you like there. It's like you might want it to, you might want more in there. So you might want to just change this particle value, say 1, which will go a bit extreme. You'll have loads of bubbles. You know, I think that's too much for an effect. But it's up to you how much you want. I'll say about 0.2 is about right. So now all we need to do is get these bubbles hovering over his hands. So that's really the last little trick to this. So all we need to do then is basically chuck this block now into this place. So let's start with, let's remove the style from here directly. We'll change this to mascot particles because this is going to be specific to our mascot. You know, it's not a universal one we can chuck in the fabric engine because it's very specific to our design. So we'll go to the style CSS. What if I press now? I think I've just deleted the file. There it is. That was lucky. Let's chuck that back into the folder. So you go back into there. I think that was where it was. Yep. And let's try that again without hitting the delete key. I've changed keyboard yet again, so I'm not used to the keyboard yet. Right then, so now we have mascot particles, we're going to call it. And in here, first we want to extend the particles class, so we get all the effects of, you know, the particles. Then we can just do, say for now again, width 200 pixels, height 200 pixels, background red, just to make sure it still exists. So there we go. So we know we've reapplied the style. We're now getting bubbles inside that block, so that's fine. So instead of doing that then now, we want to, let's just chuck a border on there so we can see where this is constantly going. And now we will have, let's get the position right first. So because this background's floated to the right, let's also float this to the right. Float to the right to match background image. Then we'll also have the media breakpoint for the mobile. And when we do that, we want to float none because the background isn't floated when it's mobile. It's gone to the center. So we'll deal with that differently. So let's start with the big one first anyway. Float to the right. Let's set a height of, say, 200 pixels for the minute. Width will go 70% because it's going to resize. So there's roughly where we are. We probably want to put a margin there. So let's just chuck margin right of about 20%. It's a bit far, maybe. Then margin left 20%. I think we can maybe get rid of the width. Yeah. Is that floating? Yeah, it is floating, isn't it? Float right, height, 220 maybe. A bit more, bring it just down behind his arms. Just make sure there's no other. No. size with him as well. So that's not sizing right. Something's not working here with the, what's not working? Because that size should be changing. Let's just inspect this. So that is centered. Why is that? Something's not right there. That is not 20% and 10. Oh, hang on. I've typed 20%, 20%. I wanted 20%, 10% on the right. There we go. That looks better. Because the image, this actual mascot image, he's technically off center in the PNG. So I'm kind of having to shift it over. So it's not far off there. So if we were to shift the right to 12 and that to 18 maybe. Nope, 19 and 11. There we go. And then if we were to now drag, because we've used percentages, it keeps the percentage the same. The only thing you'll notice now is the height's wrong. So as we're getting smaller, the height's just squashing down and getting bigger. So we could do, I don't know if they can do the height as a percentage as well. Because we've set this up specifically as a pixel size on the height. But then when the width shrinks, the image shrinks. So I don't think we're going to be able to fix the height. I think what we'll just have to do is a couple of breakpoints. So let's do height to match image, percentage width to shrink with image, fixed max width, just in case it goes too big. I don't think that'll affect anything if we remove that anyway. Never seems to go too big. But I just don't want this growing. In fact, yeah, there's no reason for that. It's not ever going too big. So we now do the include media breakpoint, and we've got the desktop, I think, was below 1,000 pixels. In fact, we can keep them on one line. And just change the height. So the height, when it's a bit smaller, let's try 170 pixels. Oh, I think that's... why does it think I'm on desktop all the time? Sure, that just altered. Oh yeah, sorry, not desktop. Desktop's the biggest one. Below desktop. So when you're below the desktop, go smaller. There we go. So there's the big one. Then we reduce, and it starts to grow there. And then we hit the other breakpoints. That snaps just in time to keep it kind of realistic again. And then as we get smaller, probably want another one here. So that'll be reduce height as we shrink. And then below desktop, below laptop now. And then we'll go a bit smaller again. About 130. Maybe 120. There, so... Oh, mind you, then we're a bit too small there. Let's try 130 again. That's better. So then we have it there. Shrinks. Shrinks. So now the only thing we've got to fix is the mobile. So on the mobile one, because we go center, we remove the float. Instead, let's just position it absolute. And then remove all the margins, because we've got the margins set above. Otherwise, that'll confuse us. Let's now do on the left, we should be able to do the same thing as the percentages, but this time on the actual physical position. Let's try, what did we set it as? 11 and 19, but this is centered. 80. Let's just start 2020 and see. And oh, the width has got to be removed as well because that was 70%. Remove all margins. Reset width. And now when we go small, right, we're slightly off. We need to push out a bit more. So 22, and we need to reduce that a little bit, maybe 17. A little bit more. Bit too much. There we go. So that's now got the mobile one. I don't like the height again though, because we can't change the height now based on mobile. You've only got that breakpoint. So let's try and get a bit creative there, and let's change the height to, let's match, you've got a height that you can use called viewport height, which is kind of the size of this, the size of the, like what would be effectively say the mobile phone's full screen height. So let's try and do it as a percentage of that. So 35% of the view's height. That's way too big. Oh, I know what we'll do. We want to proportion it to the width. So as the width shrinks, this shrinks. That'll be better. So view width. Now as we grow, oh, that's perfect. Because the image is shrinking, the width gives us almost a perfect ratio to keep that in position. So we keep that red around the guy there. We get bigger, it stays around. Get even bigger. So that, I think we're managing to keep that red block, you know, around where we want it to be. So let's just finally remove this red border now. And let's have a look. So this guy swings in, and then all these cool particles start appearing around him and fading up. And as we scroll down, we've got kind of a parallax effect going on. And also you can see these kind of, it also looks good because these particles kind of start whizzing up. You only see it if you scroll fast, but it's a very subtle effect, but they kind of start shifting up out the way as well. Like zooming off his hands if you see it just here. So I think that gives kind of a cool effect as well. It's all really subtle, but that all adds up to the overall effect. It's not in your face. It's not overkill with stuff going on. It's just really nice and subtle. So I quite like that. So that is basically how you create a parallax scrolling image, an animating in and shaking, and a particle engine, all in about maybe an hour or so. And the overall code has not been that bad. The parallax is 32 lines of code. Particle engine's 44 lines of code. So like I say, barely anything to do JavaScript effects and things. You don't need libraries, just make it yourself and then clean it up. So what I'll do with this now is tidy it up, comment it, commit it all into DnaWeb, and then all you do when you start the video, you'll type into here, new template, fabric.modern1, and you should basically end up with this complete thing anyway. And then you can just delete it and recode it yourself or look at it that way. But hopefully this has been useful. Next video we'll do is the typewriter effect. So this guy will kind of slide in here, then the typewriter will start typing here, and it all makes it more animated instead of static. And then we'll go on to padding out the bottom of the site. But really all the hard work in this site's been this top area where the most, you know, your first view of the website, which is what you want to make the best impression in the first place. This is where we focused all our attention. And then when we scroll down, it'll mainly just be content with, you know, some basic animations, but we'll make use of animations because it really livens up the website. So again, any comments, questions, just leave them in the video and I'll get back to you, and hopefully this was useful.